It's been a while, hasn't it? We've been doing a lot of initial impressions here, first thoughts there, and things like that, but finally, we're back to doing a how to play video. Welcome back, everybody. My name is Pat, and this is another Epic 7 how to play video, and in this one, we'll be talking about everyone's favorite Dragon Onesan, Alencia. As with all of my how to play videos, I'll be going super in depth, covering the character's stats, skills, possible endgame equipment builds, as well as some suggestions on how to draft them effectively in World Arena. So, before we get on to Alencia's stats, help me first appease the algorithm gods here at YouTube, and consider leaving me a like or a subscribe. Helps me out here a ton. I am extremely close to becoming a YouTube partner, and it would mean the world for me if you would help me out. With the intro out of the way, let's get on with the rest of the video. Alencinox, better known as Alencia, is an Earth Warrior of the Cancer Zodiac symbol, which means she shares a stat line with Apocalypse Ravi and Designer Lilibet. Taking a closer look at her stats, she has 975 attack, 7,054 health, 106 speed, 652 defense, 15% critical hit chance, 150 critical hit damage, 5% dual attack chance, and no effectiveness or effect resistance. This translates to the second highest health in Epic 7 and very good defense with average speed. She has very poor attack, but like most Cancer Warriors, has a way to circumvent this, and we'll talk about that a sec when we get to the actual skills. As a fun fact, in the English dub of Epic 7, Alencia is voiced by Carly Craig, which, as far as I can tell, she is a comedian, impressionist, and YouTuber. In the Japanese dub of Epic 7, however, she is voiced by Ai Nonaka, who is most famous for being Kyoko Sakura from Madoka Magica and Nursery Rhyme from the Fate franchise. Alencia's S1 is Eradicate. It has a 0.5x multiplier and a 10% max health multiplier. It has a 60 to 75% chance to defense break the target for one turn.
Show your elders some respect.
Alencia's S2 is Noble Blood. She has a 25 to 50% chance to get the Mind's Eye status whenever she is attacked for one turn. Mind's Eye increases her effectiveness and effect resistance by 30%, and it cannot be dispelled. Additionally, when she uses Eradicate on a target while having Mind's Eye, it will activate the move Trample as a follow-up attack. Trample has a 0.5x multiplier and a 12% max health multiplier. Additionally, it lowers the cooldown of her S3 Genesis by one turn. This move, even though it has a very similar multiplier to S1 Eradicate, usually ends up doing more damage because once Eradicate hits, there's a very high chance the target is defense broken, which means that Trample will do quite a bit of damage. Alencia's S3 is Genesis. You acquired 3 souls when using it, and it has a 4 to 5 turn cooldown depending on Molagora. It has a 0.5x attack multiplier and a 15% max health multiplier. It attacks all enemies and dispels all buffs from all enemies. Additionally, it grants your entire team a defense buff for 2 turns. This is a really powerful S3 for quite a number of reasons. Number 1, the damage on this move is quite good, especially for an AoE. It does more damage than both Eradicate and Trample, so that is something to take note of. Number 2, it's really, really good because it gets rid of buffs. Attack buff and re-raise are OP, and any way you can mitigate those is always welcome. Number 3, defense buff is pretty great. Whenever you have a defense buff, even on a squishy, they have the same effective HP as something like a bruiser, and on bruisers they start to become more like tanks, and on soul weavers and tanks they start to become nigh unkillable. So that is always a welcome buff to have on your team. Alencia's Soul Burn costs 10 souls and changes the defense break percentage on Eradicate from 60 to 75% to 100%. Additionally, the defense break lasts an additional turn, so instead of 1 turn, it is now 2 turns. This is a pretty good soul burn for 10 souls because you'll either use it to set up a defense break so that another ally can jump in and pick somebody off, or you'll combine it with Mind's Eye plus Trample to guarantee pick off a low effect res hero and take them out of the fight entirely. When it comes to Molagora priorities, I highly recommend that you prioritize S3 first for the -1 turn cooldown before moving to the S2 Noble Blood. The more chances you have to get Mind's Eye, the more damage you will get out of Alencia in any given fight. After you max the S2, go to S1 for Eradicate because it is the bulk of your damage. After that, round back around to Genesis and pick up the last of the damage increases on it. Since Alencia is primarily a damage dealer, as you all know from most of my videos, you want this character plus 15 if possible. Alencia is a powerful all-rounder unit. She excels in grindy matchups against bruiser and mid-range players. You'll want to play her in scenarios where you need not only green damage dealers, but additional support from her S3, Genesis. The fact that Genesis removes buffs from the opponent and also grants your team buffs at the same time allows you to swing long drawn-out matches in your favor. Since you will have defense buff, and the opponent's damage dealers most likely won't have any buffs at all, you should come out way ahead, at least mathematically. Genesis also allows for a very powerful mind game because you can punish characters such as Maid Chloe or Deanne if they burn their buffs too early. If they hold on to their buffs, you might be able to use Alencia's S1 into S2 to pick off a key target. Since the S1 Eradicate has a defense break on it, the excess damage from the S2 Trample can very easily kill or at least severely damage almost every character that doesn't have high effect resistance. It's in situations like this where you need a really strong single target DPS, as well as a utility option like Genesis, that Alencia really shines as a hero. The first build that we're going to talk about is a purely damage-based bruiser build for Alencia. It has a decent chunk of tankiness. The reason we are trying to go high damage is to mitigate one of Alencia's key weaknesses, which is that she can't 1v4 that well compared to her peers, namely Robbie. This ensures we are making the most out of each of our turns, and it is especially true if we have Mind's Eye up. Taking a look at the actual build, we are on speed immunity, although you can play crit set or health set if you want either more health or more crit chance, considering that this character does have 15% base critical hit chance. When we take a look at the desired stats, we want 1695 attack. This is pretty much the standard attack with a I-90 sword and some form of artifact, namely Draco Plate, which is what we're using as an example for this build. 1200 or more defense. This ensures that when we use Genesis and have the defense buff up, that we are reasonably tanky. We're going to basically be mathematically somewhere around 1800 or better for the most part, which is pretty good. 21k or higher health. I recognize that it is quite hard to get this much health and still have a high critical hit damage, but I think it is worth it. We are trying to go for a mixture of health and critical hit damage here so that we can really have an impact on that S1 into S2. 200 speed or better would be nice. 100% critical hit chance, so that way when we actually do S1 to S2, we're ensuring we're getting max damage, and 280 critical hit damage or better. You can kind of go effectiveness on this character if you want Genesis to hit higher ER targets, but for the most part, it isn't really worth it. Even at 0%, Genesis should get most key targets, which are the damage dealers, off the board, get them to not have any buffs so that they become slim pickings. So that's why we don't really go any effectiveness on this character. You could try to go a very fast, high effectiveness build, but I think there are just simply better heroes suited to the role. Alencia is meant to be more of an all-rounder, not a specialist in terms of removing debuffs, so keep that in mind. When we take a look at the right side, she is on a crit damage necklace, HP percentage ring, and speed boots. The artifact that I have her on for this example is Draco Plate, which is not necessarily the best in slot, and it is limited, so not everyone will have it at plus 30. So the main reason to go Draco Plate is that it provides some amount of damage while also providing you some amount of protection. It is an all-rounder artifact. If you are looking for the best in damage, you should probably take Portrait of the Savior. This will be your best in-slot damage source. Symbol of Unity obviously also works for a damage-based build if you are trying to, get around pesky dodge chance characters and your symbol is already not in use. When we take a look at the per piece average, you're looking at 7% defense apiece, 17% health, 5 speed, 14% crit chance, and 12 critical hit damage. The average piece ends up looking something like 17% HP, 14% crit chance, 12% crit damage, and then some other stat in the last spot. Keep in mind, again, you can use flat health to try to make it easier on yourself to get those HP thresholds. For most players, the first build that we talked about is going to be the best one. It has the largest amount of application across most of the PvP modes. For other players, though, who are looking for something that is more of a dedicated specialist, especially against heavy blue teams, specifically blue bruiser-based teams, this build may be better for you. This is a build that is used by a good friend of mine that tries to grind out the game versus blue units. It does less damage than the first build, but the thought process is that a team with low damage or that only has one DPS, specifically a blue one, will struggle to kill a standard Alencia. So if we make the standard Alencia much tankier, she becomes nigh impossible to kill, and basically means you should automatically win the game. In that sense, she basically becomes a checkmate of sorts. So let's take a look at the actual stats for that build. We want to be on speed immunity. This is the optimal way to play it. My friend is on speed crit, and for most of you, I think that will be the way to go, simply because of how stat hungry this version is. So do not feel bad if you cannot get these stats on speed immunity. And then for offsets, you could also go health if you really wanted to try to reach those stats and didn't really care about the immunity and could somehow get the crit chance anyway. Taking a look at the desired stats, we want 1500 attack. This is not too much different than the 1695 from the first build. It's just simply because you're most likely not going to be on Draco Plate with this build. You can, but there are other alternatives, and we'll talk about all of Alencia's artifact choices in this build as well. They can apply for the first build as well. 1350 defense. This is to be slightly tankier. So that when you have the defense buff up, you're kind of like a little bit ahead of the standard 1200 that we went with. 25k HP. My friend has 26, as you can see in the picture. But yeah, this is a very tall order to do. There's quite a lot of health per piece average, and you'll see that in the next section to get this high. But this is, again, we're just trying to make Alencia nearly unkillable. And if we can do that, then we should basically automatically win the game. 180 speed, as long as she's taking turns in a timely fashion, we don't really care. She doesn't need to be the fastest to begin with anyway. 85% crit hit chance. Again, this is a specialist specifically made to deal with blue units. So because you're attacking on color advantage, you get plus 15% critical hit chance, which means in turn that you will have 100% versus blue units with 85% critical hit chance. And then 250 critical hit damage so that we do some amount of damage, not some like piddly little amount. Taking a look at the right side, nothing has really changed here. We're still on crit damage necklace, HP percentage ring, and speed boots. The artifact, I'm not going to assume for any of these stats an artifact because there are quite a number of ways you can go about this. Since you're not going to be on immunity, you can play Timeless Anchor or Crimson Seed so that way any potential control units cannot really lock the Alencia down from doing her job of slowly picking off their one and only blue damage dealer. And then there are other options you could go with, such as the Draco Plate or the Portrait of the Saviors that we talked about in the first section. And you could also play Durandal on this if you really wanted to try to get her turns to cycle in a more timely manner. When it comes to teammates for Alencia, you want to be drafting her with teammates that not only support her, but that she supports really well. Again, Alencia is a character that does really well when you're looking for a damage dealer as well as a support in one slot. So she is best supporting other defensive heavy characters such as Crow or Fallen Cecilia. Crow has a really powerful defense buff on his S2, and Genesis also having a defense buff on the S3 means that you can kind of cycle the two of them so that you have a 100% uptime on your defense buffs on your team, which obviously the other two members on your team are going to thank you for because they'll be significantly more difficult to kill. She's also really good with Amelia. Amelia covers for one of the biggest weaknesses that Alencia has, which is she's terrible against control. So having a cleanser on your team is super awesome for Alencia, and it gives her some barriers as well as other things. Additionally, the S2 CR push can allow Alencia to do quite a bit of damage and use that Genesis right at the start of the fight and basically strip any barriers, skill nullifiers, or immunity right off the gate. In fact, if your damage is so high, you might actually even be able to pick somebody off with Genesis right at the start if you're on like a Portrait of the Saviors build. She's also really, really good with specific hard carry DPS that do exceptionally well when protected. Think of things like Spectre Tenebria or Landy or Charlotte. Charlotte in particular is of note because Charlotte is red, which means if you draft Charlotte early on in the draft, the enemy will be more likely to draft blue units, which sets you up very, very well for Alencia. You can do a 4th or 5th pick Alencia here, and it works really well with Charlotte because it complements the, or I should say hard counters the blue DPS and complements her very well because giving the Charlotte a defense buff guarantees that she will for sure always be able to AoE with her S1 if your opponent is not actually actively attacking her and giving her those buffs. For good matchups, you want to bring Alencia into teams where they are relying on buffs to really set up and do well in the match. So for that reason, you want to try and bring her into characters like Diane and Maid Chloe. She is exceptionally good against Diane and those types of comps. Mei Chloe is a bit trickier because of the revive on the team. She's not a true hard counter to Mei Chloe. She just has a slightly favorable matchup. That revive can still get you in the end, and you could still lose the game, but she is a decent pick in that scenario. Fallen Cecilia is another good matchup for Alencia because she usually does not have a ton of ER, which means you can easily kind of just attack her with Eradicate into Trample and do quite a bit of damage, and the S3 will get rid of all the barriers on the team as well as any skill nullifiers. So it kind of mitigates that protection that Fallen Cecilia is able to set up at the start of the actual fight. And then obviously she's very good against blue damage dealers, especially Rem, who is very good in the current metagame. As long as you have Mind's Eye up, you can just kind of go right into Rem with Eradicate into Trample and expect that you will either kill her outright or chunk her for a sizable amount of damage, and you will eventually whittle her down and take her off the board. She's also okay against Kisei. It's not like an amazing matchup because Kisei is usually so fast that she'll blow her S3 immediately and kill or at least debilitate a target, which is, kind of like she's done her job at that point. So you're not really stopping Kisei from doing anything. But having Genesis, having a strip and being an AoE, you can use it to knock Kisei out of stealth. And at that point, she is relatively squishy and you can kind of pick her off with pretty much anyone on your team and secure the kill on her. When it comes to bad matchups, you want to avoid bringing Alencia into the big 3 fire units in the format, which are Researcher Carrot, Ravi, and Charlotte. These characters are basically the things that drove Alencia out of the format in the first place, along with the RTA changes, so just don't do it. She's just not super great in those matchups. Also, she's particularly poor against control units. Think of things like Sage Ball. That is why my friend in that second build plays Timeless Anchor on the Alencia, because it is trying to cover for one of Alencia's biggest weaknesses. So yeah, it's okay if somebody picks a control unit into you, but you really, really do not want to be picking Alencia into more than one control style unit. And that's going to be it for the How to Play Alencia video. This is probably the most amount of editing I've done in one sitting for one of these, considering the fact that as of this morning, September 1st, the time I'm recording this video, is when they announced an Alencia banner. So we had less than 24 hours to put this all together. So hopefully you all enjoyed it. And let me know in the comments down below if I missed anything. Hopefully I did not. Or also just let me know which character you want me to cover next. There's quite a number of buffs and a lot of testing that we have to do with the September 2nd patch. So if you want to see characters like Luna, Mort, Coeric, or the new Mercedes, please, please, please let me know. Enjoy the rest of your day. Enjoy the rest of your week. And as always, I'll see you next time. Have a good one. Bye-bye.